Welcome to KeepItReal Studios, the only channel on YouTube that keeps it real. UFC 309 currently just finished, and we had a long-anticipated rematch between Michael Chandler and Charles Oliveira. The overall outcome, nobody could have expected what we got that night. Definitely one of the biggest conclusions I came to after that rematch was, Charles Oliveira is still that guy. I feel like it's so easy to look at Charles Oliveira and just think about his title reign. Don't get me wrong, his title run was quite impressive. I did love it a lot. Just from him beating guys like Chandler, Poirier, Gaethje was quite phenomenal, and even his rise to there. But a lot of people think he's washed up ever since he lost to Islam, and also following his last loss to Arman Tsarukyan at UFC 300. Just focusing a little bit on the rematch with Chandler again, we saw a very new Charles Oliveira that night. We saw a Charles Oliveira that was locked in, and it was also stated that Charles Oliveira did have an injury, but he also performed phenomenally on that night. Charles Oliveira definitely won all rounds except for the last one. But in every single round that he won, he was easily taking out a world-class wrestler in Michael Chandler, and he was holding him down and just being on his back the whole time. Michael Chandler, he's still a very explosive fighter, and the fact that Charles Oliveira could still hold him down was quite impressive. Shifting the focus more onto Charles Oliveira's other skill sets. Charles Oliveira is a very good striker. He's a very good kickboxing / Muay Thai kind of striker. He's very powerful, has good timing, and also just his combos at times are very impressive. You wouldn't really expect it from Charles Oliveira, but he is the type to kind of hit you with 3 different moves at once. A lot of people, when they focus in on combinations, they just focus on the jab and a 1-2 or different stuff like that. But Charles Oliveira is the type of fighter to kind of throw a jab and out of nowhere hit you with a knee. Charles Oliveira is a very unique and entertaining fighter, and the way he strikes and just goes out of his way to fight his opponents is quite interesting, and it's always make for fun, exciting fights. I believe that every fighter should always kind of have a mystique or something around them that a lot of people should fear. For example, Alex Pereira, you fear his aura, the left hook, he can kind of knock you out at any moment in time. So that is something to be very fearful when you step in the octagon with him. Charles Oliveira, before he used to have his jiu-jitsu, but ever since he went up against Islam and Tsarukyan, it's kind of went down. But I feel like an aspect of Charles Oliveira that a lot of people should still be very wary of is that Charles Oliveira is very dangerous. It doesn't matter where you are in the fight, he can finish you. I feel like a lot of people tend to think that Charles Oliveira is just going to submit you. But remember, Charles Oliveira still has the most finishes in UFC history, and that's not all just submissions. Charles Oliveira has a lot of knockdowns. Don't sleep on Charles Oliveira striking. This is what I was saying a little bit earlier in the video. Charles Oliveira is very adaptable in the MMA scene, and even this fight with Tsarukyan, that was a very close fight. There were moments in the match where Oliveira looked like he had Tsarukyan in deep trouble, and Tsarukyan was going to tap anytime soon. Charles Oliveira is a very dangerous fighter, and you always kind of have to be on higher alert with them. If you make a mistake and give Charles Oliveira the chance to capitalize on you, he will do it every time. So Charles Oliveira is a very dangerous fighter, and you always have to be on your P's and Q's every time when stepping in the octagon with him. Now, we get to the point where I actually have a question for all of you watching this video. Do you believe in Charles Oliveira? Do you believe that Charles Oliveira can once again be the king of the lightweight division? It's no statement that Charles Oliveira had one of the most historic title reigns in UFC history, and I definitely believe that Charles Oliveira does have the ability to become champion again. He currently has a loss to Islam and Arman Tsarukyan, and arguably, I believe those are kind of the only contenders in the lightweight division that hold up a chance against Charles Oliveira. I feel like if you put him up against anyone else in the rankings, Charles Oliveira clears them. There are times where a lot of UFC fighters have to kind of defend their ranking. Dustin Poirier, he did it with Benoit Saint-Denis. Justin Gaethje did with Rafael Fiziev. But if we're looking at the people that Charles Oliveira has to defend his rankings to, you have opponents like Beneil Dariush and Michael Chandler. And in my opinion, those are way better matchups. Charles Oliveira only loses to high caliber of opponents. Even his last fight with Tsarukyan arguably should have been a 5-rounder. I feel like there was a lot more to see that night. Right now, in the grand scheme of things, Charles Oliveira is in quite a predicament. As of right now, it does seem that as of next year, January 2025, it is going to be Islam versus Arman Tsarukyan. This is quite an interesting matchup because I feel like a lot of people are just giving the matchup to Islam, but I do think Arman Tsarukyan actually has a good chance of beating Islam in this fight. I feel like Arman Tsarukyan on paper is probably one of the most likeliest of fighters to dethrone Islam. And if you just look into their first fight, that was like Arman Tsarukyan's first fight in the UFC, and he did one of the best jobs against Islam. That's why I think it's quite interesting of a matchup, and I feel like we kind of have to wait in terms to see who wins and in which way they win to as well to kind of decide the next step for Oliveira. As of right now, Charles Oliveira is kind of in limbo because I feel like he's kind of falling under the gatekeeper category. So if you're looking at somebody like Charles Oliveira, he's only really recently lost to big names like Tsarukyan and Islam, but everybody else he's cleared. Charles Oliveira is in that dangerous category of just being a gatekeeper. But I do believe that Charles Oliveira does deserve his rematch. He was going to get his rematch, then he got injured, then Volkanovski stepped in. So let Charles Oliveira get another title shot. I believe he deserves it. I do think he can be champion again, but he does have a tough opponent in Islam or Tsarukyan. That'll be it for today's video. Tell me what you guys think down in the comments below. Do you think that Charles Oliveira is still that guy? Do you think he can gain his championship back? Or do you think he already hit his prime and that's it for him? Thank you all so much for watching. That'll be it for today's video. And don't forget to keep it real.